Rishus. Yeah, the Reish Kail. All the Chashav Elamdei Kail. To be part of such an unbelievable Chabura. Coming together day in and day out, learn Sugyas Amukas and Shas. Should be able to be nice for a little bit on the unbelievable Hachanish here that I was here at least part of. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of a Hisafa. Mechaber in Siman Tafrei Shayin Aleph, middle of discussing all of the halachas of where the menorah should be placed, Mechaber says, "Ubeis hakneses menichai b'kaisel dorim." When you light in shul, you put it on the dorim vant. Umadlikin u'mavarchin b'beis hakneses mishum persu menisa. This halacha is not mentioned in the Gemara. It's not mentioned in the Rambam. The Torah mentions it in passing, and the Beis Yosef brings Mekayros for it, many of which have been seen in the Hachanish and all of Mara Mekaymis, so beautifully laid out. The Beis Yosef doesn't bring all of the time in. Beis Yosef brings Nir shetiknu kain mipnei ha'orchim she'ein lehem bayis lahadlik boy u'kamo shetiknu kiddush beis hakneses, just like we find Siman Reish Tamach Tes on Shabbos, it's mentioned that there's an Indian to make kiddush in shul mishum orchim. The achlu b'shasu b'bei knishta. Chen kasav hakol boy. Since they were orchim in shul, they needed to hear kiddush. We made kiddush for them in shul. The same idea. People who didn't have their own bias, whether they were traveling, whatever the idea was, they needed somewhere to light the neiros. So we lived for them in shul. That was the idea. Even though today's day and age we don't have orchim, nevertheless the minhag stayed, and we still light in Beis HaKnesses for those theoretical Amoladik Orchim that used to be in shul. The other time the Beis Yosef brings Oid Tam Acher Shu Kedei Lefarsem Hanes B'fnei Kol Ha'am U'Lesader HaBrochas Lefneiim Sheyesh B'zeh Pirsum Godel Hashem Yizbarach V'Kiddush Shemoy K'Shemavorchen Oisoi B'Makelos. To do it b'Rabim, b'Pumbi, in shul, it's a bigger Persum Nisa, and that's why there's such a minhag to have this hadlok in Beis HaKnesses. And along these lines, the Beis Yosef adds from the Rivash, it's not just an inyan of to be mefarsin Beis HaKnesses in general, but specifically because of the situation that we're in Galus. As the Rivash says, Lashon, he quotes, "Haminig hazed lahadlik Beis HaKnesses minig v'sikini mishum persume nisa kiven she'ein anu yecholin l'kayim hamitzvah kitikuna lahadlik kol echad b'pesach beisim b'chutz." We can't do it properly the way it's supposed to be done in Chutz La'aretz when we're in Galus. There's Eva, there's anti-Semitism, we're worried. Since we can't do it properly, therefore, we do it in shul to be mefaris in the nes. It's more barabim, more bepumbi. It's more in spirit of the original takana. And we make a bracha on it. So it's really, the Beis Yosef mentions 2 timim, it's really 3, that's really 2. First, it's al the orchim. Secondly, it's kedei l'mefarsim hanes, whether it's time to be mefarsim the nes or to make up, to compensate for that which we can't light outside, either because of orchim or because persum nisa berabim. These are the 2 ideas that he brings. So it's interesting that the shaila that comes up, it's in many shuls, so it may be more prevalent in Eretz Yisrael than Lakewood. But when you have a shul that has multiple shtibluch, multiple batim in the Beis HaKnesses, minyan factories, a lot of minyanim going on. Is there a hadlaka only in the main shul, or is there a hadlaka in each one of those shtibluch, between Mincha and Ma'ariv in each one of them? And it could be multiple times. Obviously, it's Nagaya and Satmar and Kloisenberg and Lakewood, but it's Nagaya, Zechmosh and Eretz Yisrael, all the shtibluch, all the place where there are multiple minyanim. Is there hadlaka in each one of the shtibluch or not? So in Sefer Teres Moedim, they bring from Chaim Kanievsky that yes, you should light in each one of the shtibluch as well. There should be hadlaka in each one, not only the main shul, also the shtibluch. On the other hand, in Sefer Ner Chanukah, it's brought b'shem Chaim Kanievsky, a different version. He didn't say flat out to lighten all the shtibluch. Rather, he said that it depends. Depends if there's a Sefer Torah in each one of those shtibluch. If they have their own Sefer Torah, their own Aron Kodesh and Sefer Torah where it's kept, as opposed to every time there's laning, going to the main shul, taking out the Sefer Torah and bringing it to the shtibel. If they have their own Sefer Torah, then you should light in each one of the shtiblach. If not, then you don't light in each one, just the main shul, and that's it. There are also multiple versions. B'Shem Rabbi Yashiv. Rabbi Yashiv held. Rabbi Yashiv, one sefer is quoted as saying that initially Rabbi Yashiv held that it depends if they have their own minyan on Shabbos. If there's only one minyan on Shabbos in the main base medrash, then don't light in the shtiblach all week. Whereas I think they say a story with Shlomo Zalman, the Shaila about Chiyuvim, who davened Chiyamid. Shaila is two people had the Chiyuv the same day. Question is who was the more kavua by the minyan. So Shlomo Zalman, they say the psak was that one person davened there every single tefillah except for Shabbos morning. The other person davened there only Shabbos morning, no other time. Shabbos morning is kaveya. That's where you really daven. So the kaveya that Yashiv held originally held it depends to the minyan there on Shabbos. There's no minyan on Shabbos, then everything is tuffled to the main base medrash. If not, light in each shtibel. Then Rabbi Yashiv was chayzer and he said, no, don't light in the shtibel at all. Another version of Rabbi Yashiv, he held that the nusach they quote there is that a Bayesheni and Ezras Nosson don't light over there, but shtiblach you should light in each one. Meaning a Bayesheni Ezras Nosson, it's by definition an auxiliary. It's not really an independent bias. It's only by default. If I can't use the main base medrash for whatever reason, people are learning there, then the backup is to daven and the Ezras Nosson and the Bayesheni. But the shtiblach, the way it's situated, it's meant to have its own minyanim than it is an individual shul. Different versions, different neschayos from Moshe Sternbach. One version not to light at all, I just heard. But they quote from him even places where they do light, he held not to light in the shtiblach. So, multiple neschayos, multiple versions of it. L'fum riyata, one could perhaps entertain that this question might be told in the two timing that the Beis Yosef brings. The first time the Beis Yosef brings for lighting in shul has to do with the archim. The second time is the minyan of Persum Nisa Barabim. Persum Nisa Barabim, we can get into multiple shilas. Archim, it's more mistaver that there should only be one hadlaka. More mistaver. Even the Gedorim, like Reb Chaim says, Reb Yashiv says, these Gedorim of how much it's auxiliary, how much it's tuffle. It's more mistaver in the Tam Rishon of the Beis Yosef, if it has to do with the Archim. Let's just think about the Archim themselves. The classic halacha of Archim, which the Beis Yosef is mitzayin to, is where we made kiddush for Archim. Now, the Poskim, Rishonim, they ask, the Gemara in Psachim, how could you make kiddush in shul? The halacha is you have to have kiddush makom suda. You have to eat where you make kiddush. So you're making kiddush for the Archim, where are they eating? They can't eat in shul. Beis HaKnesses, Dina the Gemara, not allowed to eat in the shul. Beis Medrash. Nowadays, we have Hatznaim, whatever it is, but in the classical Beis HaKnesses of the Gemara, you couldn't eat in shul. So what do you mean you're making kiddush for the Archim in shul? They can't eat in shul. So the Rishonim answer that the Archim were in a side room. They were listening in to the kiddush being made in shul. They listened to the kiddush being made in shul from where they were in the side room, and that's where they had their suda. So they had kiddush makam suda. Kiddush makam suda does not mean that the makadosh necessarily has to be b'makam suda. It means the person who's being yaitza with shemei kaina, he has to have the suda b'makam kiddush, and they were doing that in the side room. Meaning every case of achnasas, every case of archim where we made kiddush for them is they were in the side room. That's where they ate. So it comes out as when it comes to Chanukah, they weren't eating in shul either. They were eating in that side room. They weren't sleeping in the shul either. You can't eat in shul, you can't sleep in shul. They were sleeping in some other room. There was some other side room, some auxiliary room to the Beis HaKnesses where the Archim stayed. The Hadlaka took place in shul. It's not the Makam Achila, it's not the Makam Shina. Yet the Hadlaka took place in the Beis Medrash, inside the shul. But if you're dealing with the regular chiv of an arich where he's eating and sleeping, one would think that it's not mistaver to make the hadlaka over there, or make the hadlaka eat the makam achila, makam shina, right? That's when the big shiloh, when the person goes, the person is an arich for Shabbos Chanukah, he's eating in one place, sleeping in the other place, the big tumult, the big shiloh, the Yashiv Dov Feinstein, where should you light, and the makam achila, the makam shina, the big question that comes up. So when they're lighting in shul, it's not the makam achila, not the makam shina. Elamai, because it's under one roof, one auspices. It's one shul that has auxiliary rooms. So the place to do it is in shul. That's the biggest Persum Nisa. Just like in your own home. You don't necessarily have to light in the dining room or the bedroom. You can light wherever there's going to be most Persum Nisa. It's the Makam Achila, Makam Shina under one roof. It's one area that encompasses everything, one umbrella area that has Achil and Shina. It's one big facility. And therefore, light, where they can have the biggest Persum Nisa in that facility. So it's very mistabra. If you look at it as one facility, the light in one place. If you go with the first time of the Beis Yosef, if you go with the second time of the Beis Yosef, on a makam of Makelef, the makam where Klal Yisrael, we Yidden are gathering, we want to make a Persum Nisa, then there's more of a room to hear that each one of those batim should have their own hadlaka. If you go with the first time of the Beis Yosef, it's more mistabed to work with these gedarim of auxiliary rooms. That's what from Riyat one would think, one would imagine. But just to go through the sugi a little bit, to go through the Inyan of Hadlok and Beis HaKnesses, we see perhaps it's not so pashat, perhaps the two timing are not really so divergent, they're not so separate one from another. Because really, it's a complex sugya, because it's not so pashat that we should be making a bracha on this Hadlok altogether. It's not so simple. It's really not so simple. The question that really comes up about this whole shaila, about lighting a Beis Medrash, is the Beis Yosef, when he quotes this Rivash, that talks about the tam to light and Beis Medrash and Persum Nisa, since we can't do the mitzvah ketikuna, because we're not lighting outside. The Rivash adds in one line, Umevarchen al zeh, kemoisha mevarchen al halel dereish chodesh, afal pisha ina elaminik. We mentioned before, this is not the Gemara, the Rambam doesn't mention it. This is a minig. It's not clear exactly when the minig began, when it arose. It's not so clear. The Poskim seem to have machlokes about it. It's a minig. So why making a bracha on the minig? Zakt Rivash, Kamosh Mevarchen al Halal Rish Chodesh. Halal Rish Chodesh is only a minig. It's a chatzi halal. So medalgin, only chatzi halal. It's a minig. You make a bracha. Oh, so too you can make a bracha on this minig of Adlok and Beis HaKnesses. The Pli Atzuma is, back to Chacham Tzvi, that it doesn't stim halacha with the Mechaber. The Mechaber is telling us to lighten Beis HaKnesses, to make a bracha on Beis HaKnesses. The Mechaber himself, in Hilchos Rosh Chodesh, holds that you do not make a bracha on Halal. Since Halal Rosh Chodesh is only a minig, it's only Chatzi Halal, it's only a minig, you don't make a bracha on it. Here in the Mechaber paskins in Hilchos Chanukah to make a bracha on Hadlok and Beis HaKnesses. The Mechaber himself paskins in Rosh Chodesh, you don't make a bracha on Halal. It's Mechaber. That's a Chacham Tzvi's kasha. So what about if we revert to the first time of the Beis Yosef? What if we go to the time that he mentioned, the first time of the Kol Boy, that the Archim, that they need a Hadlaka, so we light for them in Beis HaKnesses, that should be the time. That's also problematic, because today's day and age, we don't have Archim anymore. And it's not just today's day and age, Tavshim Pei Gimel, it's today's day and age of the Mechaber also. How do we know that? The Mechaber himself says so. In Siman Reish Samach Tes, when the Tur and the Mechaber bring the minig of making Kiddush in Shul, some shuls in the world still actually do it. It's hard to find it in Lakewood, but the minig to make Kiddush in Shul, the Mechaber brings it, and at the end of the halacha, in Reish Samach Tes, he says, you shouldn't do it in today's day and age, because we don't have Archim anymore. The Mechaber says it's not a good minig to keep to anymore. Amol, when they were Archim, it made sense. Now it doesn't make sense anymore. So don't make Kiddush and Shul anymore. Mechaber in Siman Reish Samach Tes, when it comes to Kiddush and Shul, he objects to making Kiddush since we have no Archim anymore. What are we making Kiddush for? When it comes to Hilchos Chanukah, all of a sudden the Mechaber is Seisim, and he brings his halacha without any objection to light in Shul and to light with the bracha, even though there are no more Archim. Seems to be a theory. Any way you slice it, whether you go with the first time, whether you go with the second time, either way we have share in the Mechaber why you're making a bracha. If it's Al Tzorchim, the Mechaber says in Reish Samach Tes not to make Kiddush Al Tzorchim anymore. If it's Al Tzaminig, you make a bracha on the minig, the Mechaber paskins, Rosh Chodesh, you don't make a bracha on Halal. It's a theory. How do we reconcile the shita of the Mechaber? This is the big Pli Atzuma of the Mechaber. So there's really another angle, perhaps, over here. Another angle to understand why we're making a bracha. The Gemara in Sukkah, Daf Mem Daled, discusses the inyan of Chibet Arava. Chibet Arava Rashi Taishit means the Nanua of the HaRav. We do it on Hoshana Rabbah. The Gemara talks about this, we'll call it Hanhaga, for lack of a better term, of Chibut HaRav. The Gemara brings various Amoraim that did Chibut HaRav, some with a bracha and some without a bracha. The Gemara says that it's totally in the Machlokes if HaRav is Minig Nevi'im or is it Yisoid Nevi'im. Yisoid Nevi'im means that Nevi'im instituted a takana, a real mitzvah d'Rabbanon, of taking this HaRav. Minig Nevi'im means it's not a real mitzvah per se. It's a hanhaga that they were Firdain and Klal Yisrael to do this HaRav, taking of this HaRav. If you hold that Chibut HaRav is Yisoid Nevi'im, that means it's a real mitzvah that you make a bracha on. If it's only a Minig Nevi'im, then you don't make a bracha. Minig, you don't make a bracha. This is the makar for this idea of the Mechaber and Hilchos Reish Chodesh that you don't make a bracha on a Minig. That's where it comes from, this Gemara. Minig Nevi'im machman ishkem bracha. Yisoid Nevi'im machman. Yeah, bracha. Yisoid Nevi'im. Minig Nevi'im, you don't make a bracha. This is the makar. And Rashi explains, Tosfos explains, the reason for this is that a Minig, you can't make a bracha because you can't say Asher Kedishana b'mitzvaysa v'tzivanu al whatever you're going to say, because you can't say the word v'tzivanu. If it's only a minig nevi'im, there's no v'tzivanu. On a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, you can say v'tzivanu. Why? Because leisasur. There's a mitzvah of leisasur and isra of leisasur. You have to follow Dibri Chazal. So therefore, a minig you can't make a bracha. There's no leisasur on a minig. That's what Rashi says. That's what Tosfos says. There's no leisasur. That's the difference. Tosfos and Sukkah Daf Mem Dalet and Beis asks the kasha. If that's the case, that you can't make a bracha on a minig, so why do we make Kiddush and Havdalah on Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golius? Bishlama, in the days of old, when we were Mekadosh the Chodesh Al Pi Re'iyah, it was a real suffix. It's a real Sveika Dedina. Fine, that's one thing. But nowadays, everyone is Beki and Bekviyah Diarcha. We know when Rosh Chodesh is. We go with the Chodesh, we go with the Cheshbonus. We know when Yom Tov really is. It's not a suffix. So why are we doing it? Minig Aviseinu B'Yadeinu. Keep up the minig aviseinu. It shouldn't be one day. It's going to be chayil kalkula. We're afraid. So minig aviseinu b'yadeinu. We keep Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golius. It's only a minig. So why are we making kiddush and Havdalah? You can't say kiddush and Havdalah. How can you make brachas? You want to be machmer. Good, be machmer. But how can you make brachas? Zok Tosfos a teret. Don't put on tefillin. Not tefillin. Yeah, Tosfos doesn't even address that. Yeah. Maybe totally in the machlokes if every day is a chiyuv or if it's only once in the life, a kafel of tefillin. That's Tosfos not even talk about this. Good question. So Tosfos says a teretz, very shver. Tosfos says that since you're not saying the word v'tzivanu in Kiddush and Havdalah, it's okay. The whole issue with making a bracha is you're not allowed to say the word v'tzivanu. V'tzivanu is only when leisasur applies, and if it's only a minute, it's no leisasur. If you're saying the word v'tzivanu, it's not a problem. Kiddush and Havdalah, you don't say the word v'tzivanu, so you can make brachas. Even brachas you can make, even though you're saying them. Hope I'm a Kaddish Yisrael V'Hazmanim. Brachas is not a problem. It's only when you're saying the word v'tzivanu. That's where we run into. That's the third rail. That's what we can't touch. That's Tosfos' teretz. Factor on, what do you mean? You explain to me Kiddush and Havdalah, the Nusach of brachas, the Tefillah, that's all fine. But L'maisa, we also make brachas, ala mitzvahs also. The second night of Pesach, we make the bracha Asher Kedishana B'Mitzvaysa V'Tzivanu ala Chilas Matzah. How do you make V'Tzivanu ala Chilas Matzah the second night of Pesach? V'Tzivanu, if you're telling me Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golius is only a minig aviseinu, how can you say V'Tzivanu ala Chilas Matzah? The second day of Rosh Hashanah, V'Tzivanu Shmaya Kol Shofar. How can you say V'Tzivanu? As they affect the Ran. The Ran, he doesn't have an answer for Tosfos. The Ran says his own teretz. He says it's a mistake to think that the Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golius is only minig. It's much more than minig. Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golius is takana kavua from Chazal. It's like a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. It's more than just minig. Today's day and age, Chazal etched it in stone. It's takana kavua. That's why we can say b'tzivan. That's the Ran's teretz. Two approaches. How Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golius. Tosfos is shver, but the Ran says the teretz is that it's not really a minig, it's much more than that. The Brisker Rav, in Hilchos Brachos, he's medayik from the Rambam in multiple places that the Rambam learns that Yom Tov Sheni is only a minig. It's only a minig. Multiple places it's meduyik. That Yom Tov Sheni the Rambam holds as a minig ba'alma, not like the Ram. So according to the Rambam, we still have shver the kasha, Yom Tov Sheni Shel Golius, how can you say v'tzivanu Al Achilas Matzah, V'tzivanu, L'shmoyer Kol Shofar, still Shver. You don't have the Ran Zeitza. Says the Brisker Rav, this whole Hanocha, that the chiluk between minig and mitzvah, minig neviim, yisoid neviim, is based upon leisaser, doesn't work for the Rambam altogether. Because the Rambam writes in multiple places that there's an issur of leisaser even on minig. Even minig has the idea of leisaser. Multiple places. The Rambam writes in the Hakdama, V'chein yisbor mehem haminhagos v'hatakonos sheheskinu oishenagu b'chol dar v'dar k'mo shero bezdin shel oisei adar l'fi she'aser laser mehem shenamer loisaser min adavar asher yagilu l'cha yamin asmal. The Rambam says explicitly, even minhagos, takonos, and nagu b'chol dar v'dar, there's still an issur of leisaser. Few places he says it. There's an issur of leisaser even when it comes to minig. So the whole Gemara and Sukkah that's differentiates between minig neviim, yisoid neviim, really is in question. What's the difference between the two of them? If the whole difference between the two of them is like Rashi and Tosfos explain because of leisaser, that doesn't work for the Rambam. The Rambam holds his leisaser on minig also. How did the Rambam read this Gemara altogether? What's the chiluk between minig neviim and yisoid neviim? Says the Brisker Rav, the difference between minig and mitzvah doesn't have to do with the driving force behind the chiyuv. That's not the point. The chiluk between minig and chiyuv, Dr. Brisker Rav, is in the pu'ula, the action of what you're doing. Not the chiyuv why you're doing it, but what you're doing. That's differentiating. That's the determining factor of whether you can make a bracha or not, the difference between minig and mitzvah. Meaning to say that something, an action, a pu'ula, which by definition is b'chefza a mitzvah, is something you can make a bracha on, regardless of the reason why you're doing it, regardless of the mechayiv of what's being mechayiv you to do it, regardless of the madrega of that chiyiv that's being mechayiv you to do it. Even if the level, the madrega of that chiyiv is only the level madrega of a minig, doesn't make a difference. If what you're doing, the action you're doing, has a shem chefta shel mitzvah on it, you're going to make the bracha b'tzivanu on it. Because again, the Rambam Shita is everything has leisaser. Leisaser, the word b'tzivanu is possible to say, it works, the lashon fits no matter what, because you are saying, because there is a leisaser on whatever you're doing, even if it's only a minute. The determining factor of bracha is if the pu'ula of that action is b'chefza a mitzvah or it's only just a hanhag. Now, how do you get into that category? How do you make the cut to be called a chefza shel mitzvah, a ma'isa mitzvah, or just something hanhag ba'alma? So really, there are two different tracks, two different ways how to get there. Either if Chazal were mesaken it to be a mitzvah gemura, a mitzvah d'Rabbana means Chazal deemed this action as a ma'isa mitzvah. They invented a mitzvah of Ner Chanukah. They deemed the mitzvah of laying Gans Hallel to be a ma'isa mitzvah. They made the Kriyas HaMegillah to be a ma'isa mitzvah. If there is a ma'isa mitzvah, Chazal turned it into a ma'isa mitzvah by being kevei a mitzvah gemura, then that by definition is called the chefza shel mitzvah. The action you're doing is called a ma'isa mitzvah. Now that it's called a ma'isa mitzvah, if you're doing it, whether you're doing it based upon a chiyuv of chiyuv gomer, whether it's only a minig, no matter what, you're going to make a bracha on it. That's one track, how to be called a ma'isa mitzvah. Or if it's a mitzvah deraisa. If you have a mitzvah deraisa, like achilas matzah, that by definition is called a ma'isa mitzvah. It's a mitzvah deraisa. If you're going to be doing it at a different time, for example, Yom Tov Sheni, even though the reason why you're doing it, the mechayiv of to do it is only a minig, but since what you're doing is the same chefza of achila as you did the last night, the first night of Pesach, what you're doing is the same exact surah, the same exact gather, the ma'isa mitzvah, the exact same thing as what you did yesterday. That's called doing a ma'isa mitzvah. The reason why you're doing it, the mechayiv to do it is only minig, but what you're doing is by definition a ma'isa mitzvah. Because it's the exact same thing. It's the same shem achila as last night's achila. So what you're doing, that's the kiveya, regardless of why you're doing it. Obviously, if there's no chiyuv at all, there's no minig at all, you just decide to do it, obviously you're not going to make a bracha. It has to be that there's a mechayiv. But even if the mechayiv, the level, the gather of that mechayiv is only minig, but if the thing you're doing, the action you're doing, the pu'ula you're doing has on it a shame of chefza shel mitzvah, then therefore you're going to make a bracha on it. Says the Brisker Rav, Chibut Arava, whether it's Yisoid Nevi'im or Minig Nevi'im, the machlokes therein is if Chazal Mesakin The Nevi'im were masakin a ma'isa mitzvah of chibut harav. If you hold the side of the din, that means they were masakin a mitzvah gemura of chibut harav. So when you're doing it, you're doing something which is bechefza mitzvah d'Rabbanan, like a lokas ner Chanukah. If you hold minig Nevi'im, they never invented this nanua arava, this chibut arava. They never deemed it. They never turned it into a ma'isa mitzvah. It's a anhaga, it's not ma'isa mitzvah. They never turned it into a ma'isa mitzvah. Therefore, even though there is a minig, and if a person doesn't do it, he's over l'isasa. But what you're doing is not called a ma'isa mitzvah, and therefore you wouldn't make a bracha on it. Chazal will almost sakin brachas on ma'isa mitzvahs, not on hagas. Even though there's a chiyuv to do it, even though if you don't do it, you're over l'isasa. But not the chefza ma'isa mitzvah. Look, the Biskra of Yontav Sheni Shel Golius. Yontav Sheni Shel Golius, again, according to the Rambam, is only minig. Not like the Ran. It's only minig. But since it is what you're doing on Yontav Sheni Shel Golius is achilas matzah, it's the exact same shem achila as yesterday's achila. The exact same tkiyah shofar as yesterday's tkiyah shofar. What you're doing is b'chefza mitzvah, you can make a bracha on it. Even though the mechayev to do it is only minig. Beautiful Hagdar of the Briskerov. Beautiful Hagdar. Dr. Briskerov. What's Hallel on Rosh Chodesh? Hallel on Chanukah, Hallel on Yom Tov Rishon of Pesach, Hallel on Sukkot. That's a Ma'isa Mitzvah Gemura. Gans Hallel is a Ma'isa Mitzvah Gemura. You make a bracha on it. Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, Chatzi Hallel when you medalgen, that Hallel is a different Hallel. It's a different surah. It's a different Ma'isa than what you're doing on Chanukah, what you're doing on Sukkot, you're doing the first day of Pesach. It's a different mitzvah. It's a different action. That Ma'isa, what you're doing, of saying Hallel, that was never deemed a Ma'isa mitzvah. Therefore, Mechaber holds that on Rosh Chodesh, when you're saying half Hallel, this action of half Hallel was never deemed a Ma'isa mitzvah. It's Anhoga. Shen Higu. We should do it. We have to say it. But it's not called the same Ma'isa that we find elsewhere is a Ma'isa mitzvah in and of itself. And since the basis of this whole action is just Anhoga, it was never deemed a Ma'isa mitzvah, therefore you don't make a bracha on it. That's his pshat in the Rambam, pshat in the Mechaber, a beautiful understanding, beautiful Hagdara. When you make a bracha, beautiful understanding in the pshat in the Gemara and Sukkah, Daf Mem Dalef. Now let's get back to Chanukah, Hadlakas Ner in Beis HaKnesses. Hadlakas Ner in Beis HaKnesses is something which is multifaceted. On the one hand, it looks somewhat similar to the Hadlaka we do at home. First night, it's Mahadrin, not Mahadrin, but you each night, we light. It looks a little bit similar to what we do in the house. On the other hand, it's very different. In the house, you light by Pesach Habayis. In Shul, you light on the Kaisel Joimi. You massage him, you Mizrach Lamayr, like you do it in the Beis Hamikdash. To some degree, it looks similar to the regular Hadlak we do in the house. To some degree, there are Shinuyim. How do we look at the Hadlak in the Beis HaKnesses? Is this some new invention, which is its own tzura that was created for this Hanhoga, for this minig of lighting in Beis HaKnesses? Or the exact same thing we're doing at home, just as an add-on to do it again in Shul? Is it the same Maisa that we're doing at home? Or is it something new that was invented just like we're doing in Beis HaKnesses? Meaning, is it Doimet the Gans Halal or Halb Halal? Is it the same thing we're doing in other places, in other areas? Or is it like half Halal Rosh Chodesh? It's a new invention, which it may resemble a little bit, somewhat the full Halal, but it's something new, and therefore it's not called a Maisa Mitzvah, and you don't make a bracha on it. How do we look at it? How do we look at it? So from the Siddur Hadvarim and the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch, it would sound like it's nothing new. Where do they bring in this whole halacha? This whole concept of lighting a Beis HaKnesses. One would expect it have its own siman in Shulchan Aruch. Midig, so lights, neiris, nechner Chanukah in Shul. Well, that's what one would expect, one would think. There's no special siman for it. In middle of Taf Reish Ayin Aleph, which is the siman that talks about where you light. In middle of Sif Zayin, where should you light it? Mitzvah la'anicha b'tafach hasamach lepesach l'smol. In middle of this sif, where it tells you how to light at home, and the Mechaber sticks in, the Torah sticks in, Beis HaKnesses, manicha b'kaisel darim. In the placement of Ner Chanukah, where you place it, tafach hasamach lepesach, how high, how low? Oh, in Shul you put the kaisel darim. It's not a separate halacha. It's just one of the halachas, one of the prati dinim and placement of the menorah. In shul, this is where you place it. That's the place where it's more. Agavorcha, that's where it's mentioned. And the mechaber is mayach even more than the Torah. The Torah, that's all he says. The mechaber is mayach, and he says also, listen, Zion, you should know, matlikim bevarchim beis hakneses, mishum p'sum benisa. After he tells you where to put it. It's like an afterthought as to where the halach is to place it in shul. It would seem that it's not a new invention. It's all part of Hilchas Kriyas Makam of where to light menorah, where to make Pesum Nisa. It's not something new. And the idea behind this is really because that even according to the last shot of the Mechaber, we're doing it Mishum Pesum Nisa, we want to have a public display of Pesum Nisa. It's really fashioned around the same way that the first shot in the Beis Yosef fashions it. The same way, if there would be Archim in Shul, the place they would light is in Shul, in Kaisel Droimi, to make the most Pesum Nisa, who are then, according to the second time of the Beis Yosef, who are then, if we're doing it just because we want to have Makelas, Pesum Nisa, Barabim, the way we're going to do it is the same way we would have done if there would have been Archim over here. It's the same structure, it's the same idea. It's the same way we light at home. The way we would light, if we'd be lighting in Beis Medrash, it would be Kaisel Droimi, Dumi to the Beis HaMikdash. Just like if there would be Archim over here, and staying and eating and sleeping in an auxiliary room, we'd light in Beis HaKnesses. So too, the way to make Pesum Nisa in Beis HaKnesses is Dumi to the Beis HaMikdash, Kaisel Droimi, set up the neighbor like the Beis HaMikdash. This is the way you do it in the format of the Beis HaKnesses. It's not a new invention. It's the same old Hadlaka just being done in the format of Beis HaKnesses. And that's the way you do it in Beis HaKnesses. Just like everyone agrees that's the way the Archim would do it, so too, even if you're the second time in the Beis Yosef, the way to do it is as if there were Archim over here. That would be the tzura of how to make the ideal, the optimum Pesum Nisa in Beis HaKnesses. So it comes out, if that's what the Mechaber means, it's beautiful why the Mechaber paskins to make a bracha. We had a kasha. The Mechaber himself paskins you don't make a bracha on Halal Rosh Chodesh. That's because Halal Rosh Chodesh is a half a Halal, and it's a different hanhog, it's a different pu'ula than what you do on other Yom Tovim. That's only a hanhog, it's not a ma'aseh mitzvah. You don't make a bracha on it. Lighting in Beis HaKnesses is not something different. It's the same thing we do at home. We're doing in Beis HaKnesses also. It's the same ma'aseh. It's the same pu'ula. If it's the same pu'ula, this is a pu'ula which has a din of a ma'aseh mitzvah. Therefore, you make a bracha on it. As long as there's a hanhaga, as long as there's a minig and there's a lay softer on it, you can make a bracha on it because it's the same pu'ula that Chazal deemed the ma'aseh mitzvah at home. You're just doing it in Beis HaKnesses also. So therefore, the Rambam, the Mechaber could agree that you'd make a bracha on it. The Rambam doesn't bring it, but the Mechaber that does bring it, he holds you can make a bracha on it. It's not a steer to that which you don't make a bracha on halal. Over there, it's a different ma'aseh. This was never deemed a ma'aseh mitzvah. Over here, by Halakas Ner Chanukah, it was deemed a ma'aseh mitzvah. It's the same old ma'aseh you're doing it at home, you're doing it in shul. Therefore, you're going to make a bracha on it. It's not a steer in the Mechaber. So it comes out that there isn't really a yesodistic difference between the first time and second time of the Beis Yosef. Both of them agree that what's going on over here is the hadlaka, that what would have been if there would have been archim. How would you get the optimum Pesum Nisa? How would you get the ideal Pesum Nisa? The hagdara of how you do it is not so different between the first time and the second time. All of the differences of auxiliary rooms, the way Reb Chaim says it, Reb Yashiv says it, all these halachas would still apply. It doesn't make a difference between the first time and the second time. It's the same ma'aseh mitzvah you're doing at home, the same ma'aseh mitzvah you're doing in shul. It all theoretically, if it would be archim, how you do it, even if the time is like the second time of the Beis Yosef, which we have to say it is, because if the time is out archim alone, and we'd have a steer from Reish Hamachtes in Hilchos Shabbos, Hilchos Kiddush, the time is like the second time of the Beis Yosef. That's what was Saimach on to make the bracha, but still it has the same hagdara as what would be the optimum Pesum Nisa of how you do it in shul. It's interesting. It's some food for thought. I was thinking about the Shaila that, unfortunately, there was a terrible tragedy years ago in Telz. There was a fire in the dormitory. Lives were lost. And they went from Hadlakas Ner Chanukah. And ever since then, for years, they were masakin in Telz that instead of lighting in the dorm, there's one Hadlaka for everybody. There's one Hadlaka just in Beis Medrash.
He said that the reason why there was no reason fire because the Hadlakas wasn't that.
Again, I'm sorry?
He said, what was the reason why he said they stopped it? Because the Hadlakas Ner Chanukah in the dormitory? Yeah.
It was fire. It was fire, yeah. Right. Yeah. They stopped lighting in the dorm on Chanukah because of safety reasons. So what they instituted then was they instituted in Telz in America. So the truth from Moshe that Shaila that they should light in the dorm, or should light in the dining room. Baron held light in the dining room, Moshe held light in the dorm, then the Shaila bet. What? The dining room, yeah. Baron, yeah. So there are plenty of people lighting the dorm also. We shouldn't say, but yeah. So until they light in Beis Medrash, one person lights in Beis Medrash, and that's it. They dance, middle second seder, and everyone sits down, continues second seder. So yesh mefakfikin. They're not lighting not in the makam mechila, not in the makam shina. The Beis Medrash, that's not where they sleep. It's not where they eat. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Not to be mefakfik chas v'shalom, but that's where they live. That's where they live. Yeah. Right.
We don't know how back it went.
So just to be miyashiv, not shver. You see the way you'd make when you're an oich on an auxiliary to a Beis Medrash, the way you'd make the hadlaka is in Beis Medrash. That's the ideal way to make it. That's where you have the most presuming Isa when you have something that's when you have a situation of orchim that are in auxiliary rooms. The place to make the ideal presuming Isa is in Beis Medrash, in Beis Knesset. That would be the best place to make it. That would be just one HaRav to be miyashiv the minute tells. I just wanted to just theorize what comes out over here. An interesting idea. It comes out that we have two different types of hadlakas. We have hadlaka at home, and we have hadlaka in Beis HaKnesses. And the way we're coming out now, even though it's a new takana, it's a new minig, to light in Beis Medrash because presuming Isa makelos, and it's dumi to the Beis Hamikdash because it'll join me. But it's the same mitzvah, the same ma'aseh mitzvah as what we're doing at home. And that's the basis why the Mechaber says you can make a bracha on it. It's not a new thing. It's not like half halal. It's the same ma'aseh mitzvah. It's the same thing. One of them has a very stark resemblance to what you do in the Beis Hamikdash. And one of them doesn't have such a stark resemblance. There are some halachas which we borrow from there, but it's being done in the home, in the Pesach Beisai.
They lit two, after the HChanukah, they lit two menorahs in the Beis Hamikdash, right? They lit the menorah of Nim. They must have lit a menorah, it was a different number of menorahs, right?
That's what Menisa did. Somebody made the Beis Hamikdash also. I hear.
They must have lit two.
Interesting.
One was inside, one was a chatzar. They're stating in Nosson and Alanisim. No, it wasn't the same menorah. Now they have the whole to do. They found the Rambam's menorah, but whatever it is, that's the menorah is 7, and here we have 8. So, Charetz is under luck.
So I'll just a little bit of a taich to maybe put them together. These two adlokas at home and in the Beis HaKnesses.
I mean, we'll see what we asked earlier. Could we that somebody said from the Beis HaKnesses is bigger and is adif than that luck at home? Can't be, right? Even after the takana, let's say it was nisyasid midin persumenisa. There's more people there. So what's the pshat? Maybe I should only light. If you're an areach, dafür kein zuchen or nachsanoi, maybe you should be part of the Beis HaKnesses taka.
You ended off the share with, right? Good kasha. Just perhaps to put them together a little bit. To put them together a little bit. The idea of the Beis HaKnesses, which is dumi to the Beis Hamikdash, and at home. We find of the Xeris that the Iyunim were Geyser and Klal Yisrael. We know about what the Pulmus of Yavan stood for. Chochmas HaTeva, the Iyunim, the Hayb Chachamim. Maral says because they were Chachamim, that's why they were Mekane Klal Yisrael, who has Chochmas HaTorah. Women Soine Ben Nosson. They're in the parsha. They understand what Chochmah is about. That's precisely what enraged them. Pulmus Yavan is one of the isms that has to do with Chochmah generally. That's we understand it. But we know that Shulchan Aruch says in Tafresh Ayin Hey that Noshim are also mitzvah, they're also mechuyev in Hadlakas Neris. Afein hayu ba'isa nes. What does it mean? Afein hayu ba'isa nes. The Tad says, Mishabur brings it. Afein hayu ba'isa nes because the Noshim had a gzeira on them Kol Anissus Tiboil Lehegman. Gemara in Ksubis, beginning of Ksubis, talks about this Gzeira, that they knew that people were getting married on Wednesdays, so the Hegman would come, and they had this Gzeira Kol Anissus Tiboil Lehegman Tchila. And one really has to stop and wonder, this doesn't seem to fit into the whole character description we have of Yavam. This Gzeira, B'Pashtas, has to do with Inyane Taiva, Inyane Chumrius, Kol Anissus Tiboil Lehegman. Where does this fit into the whole fullness of Yavan? Where does it fit into the Gzeira of trying to take away Kedusha, trying to take away Ruchni, to take Lashkichim Teresecha, Lavim Kulkei Ritzenecha? It seems to do what has to do with Chumrius, has to do with Taiva. Where does this fit into the scheme of things in Yavan? Another Gzeira, which is also, we have to really wonder where it comes from, what it's all about. The Midrashim tell us, this is not so commonly talked about, but one of the Gzeiras of Yavan was they made a Gzeira on Klal Yisrael, they're not allowed to write a Ksuba. Anyone who writes a ksuba to his wife, his fingers will be cut off. Brought the Midrashim.
It's in Medrash Antiochus.
Medrash, it's in Beis HaMedrash. I will show you this. You can't write a ksuba. Ksuba, of all things. What's their obsession with the ksuba? Again, where does this fit into the scheme of things when it comes to the fullness of Yavam? What's the idea? The Bach brings the Medrash. We know that the Iyunim came in to be Metama, the Heichel, to be Metama, the Beis HaMikdash. It's not just that they came into the Beis HaMikdash, there was a war going on, and the Hesach Hadas, Agavurcha, they happened to have been Metama, the Beis HaMikdash, they happened to have been Metama, the Shemen. They were coming Adai to the Hachi, to be Metama, the Beis HaMikdash, to be Metama, the Shemen. They wanted Tumah, Dafka Tumah. What's the idea that they're trying to be Matama? They want to be Matama the Shemen. Dafka, looking for it. The idea is that when it comes to Chochmah, Yavan's all on board. They're with us. They're there. When it comes to the metaphysical, when it comes to Inyani Kedusha, when it comes to Hashras HaShechina, that's where it ends. Like the Ramban says that Aristotle, anything that couldn't be sensed with the five senses, he had an aversion to. He didn't hold of, he didn't believe in. You have to be able to have it in the Gashmi, the Chumristic world. Anything above that, metaphysical, is something that they couldn't tolerate and they wanted to eradicate. Klal Yisrael has Chachma, but Klal Yisrael has Kedusha, Ashras HaShechina. That they can't deal with. That has to be eradicated. They came to Kavanah to bring Tumah into the Makam Ashras HaShechina, specifically to the Menorah, the Shemen. Chazal tell us, the Gemara in Shabbos, the reason why there's halakas and menorah is because the Havayra, that's what it's here for. 40 years in the Midbar, they went La'ira, they didn't need any lights, they didn't need any candles. What's it about? That's what the menorah was. That the Shechina by Klal Yisrael. Shechina by Klal Yisrael, that's got to go. The Tama the Mikdash, the Tama the Shemen that's used to make the oil, so that Hashras HaShechina, that we got to get rid of. That they can't tolerate. The Shechina doesn't only reside in the Beis HaMikdash. It's not the only place where it resides. There's another place where the Hashras HaShechina. That's by Yiddish Mishpacha. The Yiddish Mishpacha, the Hashras HaShechina. The Gemara in Kedushin, Daf Ayin Amid Beis. Rab Chamer Reb Chanina. Kishakadosh Baruch Hu Masher Shechinasai Eina Masher Ela Al Mishpachas Miyuchasus BiYisrael. Where is there Hashras HaShechina by Klal Yisrael? By the Mishpachas Miyuchasus BiYisrael. Mer bring the pasuk. Shenemar Bo'ei Sahinu Hashem Eyel Elokim L'chol Mishpachas Yisrael. L'chol Yisrael Lo Nemer Ela L'chol Mishpachas. Mishpachas. Daf Amid Beis. Reb Chamer Reb Chanina tells us that when the Hashras HaShechina by Klal Yisrael, it's where? By Esahinu Hashem Eyel Elokim L'chol Mishpachas Yisrael. A Yid's about to begin binyan bayis neman b'Yisrael, about to get married. Kol hanissus, he's about to get married. They're about to form a new mishpacha. Mishpachas miyuchasos b'Yisrael, with his zarim yuchas HaRav. There's a lineage. That's where HaKadosh Baruch Hu with Mashrei Shechina. Oh, you want to go get married? You want to build a new mishpacha? A new makam of Hashras HaShechina? Kol hanissus tibor lehegmen tchila. To be matal tumah. Rein darfen tummen to that mishpacha that's about to go be built now with this new binyan that's going to be La'adi Adel Teferes mishpacha michosas b'Yisrael. Just like they came into the Beis Hamikdash to be metama the makam ashras hashchina of the tzibur of Klal Yisrael, Chlolius, so too they came to be matal tumah in the makam ashras hashchina of the mishpachas michosas b'Yisrael kol anisas tibor lehegmen tchil. We all know Ish v'Isha and the Zoicha, the Shechina Shrui B'neihem. How the Shechina Shrui B'neihem? Alam B'farshim say, Ish, Isha, both have the Isius Aleph Shin. The difference between Ish and Isha is Ish has the extra letter Yud, Isha has the extra letter Hey. When Ish and Isha are Zoicha, the Shechina Yud Kei is Shari B'neihem. Have Ashuras Shechina of Yud Kei B'neihem. Ish v'Isha. It's gewaldig, it's beautiful. When the Shechina Shrui B'neihem, they have a Yud Kei, but it's only a half of the Shem Hashem. It's only Yud and Kei. What happened to the Vav Kei? Where did the Vav Kei come from? In the end of Parshas Chayisora, Pasuk says that Avram Avinu had Pilag Shim. Pilag Shim. Rashi there says from the Medrash, Chosek Siv. Now we don't know what this means because all of the svarim that we have it with the yud, but Rashi quotes from the Medrash and it's chosuk siv, it's missing a yud. The Medrash said it's missing a yud. It's spelled pilagshim shin mem, not shin yud mem. Pilagshim. Look, Rashi, why is it chosuk siv? The Medrash says because einay al achas. It was only keturah. He only married keturah. That's why it says chosuk. Everyone asks, Yud Aleph Mefarshei Rashi, everyone asks the kasha. So if it's really chasuk, if it's only Pilegesh Achas, so why does it say them? Just say Pilegesh. Everyone asks this kasha. Zok the Goin. The Goin says a teretz. But before he says a teretz, he asks a few more questions. Rashi fears us. What's the difference between a Pilegesh and a regular Isha? Isha is Biksuva. Pilegesh is below Ksuva. The Ramban has a different shot. The Rashi had the chiluk between Pilegesh and an Isha, but the Ksuva, not a Ksuva. Fact the Goin, why does Rashi have to enlighten me as to what the chiluk between the Isha, Pilegesh, and Ksuva, not a Ksuva over here? This is time to tell it to me. What does it have to do with that at the beginning of the Rashi? Interesting piece of information. One more question asks the Goin. Why is it called Ksuva? Why isn't it just called Ksav? There's a ksav of all the tnoim and ishli ishtoi. What is he going to do for the isha? Zok the Goyin ksuva has extra letters of vav and k. The missing letters of the yud k of ish v'isha of the shechina shrui b'neihem come derech the ksuva, the vav and the hey that's inserted into the word ksuva. That's what brings the end of the Shem Hashem into the marriage. It's that ksuva. Zok Rashi, the chiluk between a pilegesh and an isha is one has a ksuva, not a ksuva, and one doesn't have. When is the shechina shtoye b'neihem? When there's a ksuva, when that's the relationship they have, there's a schayvesen. Then there's a shechina, the vav k is added into the isha to be mamala the shame of yud k vav k. Zok the Goin, that's why there's a mem in pilegesh. Pilag shim chasa yud. Break it down into two words. Plag shame, half of the Shem Hashem. Plag shame. They have the yud and the k. They don't have the vav and the k.
Right.
That's why Rashi fears is they have a pilegesh, doesn't have a ksuva, and ish v'isha. When it's a real wife, you have a ksuva. It's explaining why there's a mem there. Leaves off the yud. It's only pilegesh achas. Why is there a mem to teach you what a pilegesh is? Plag shame doesn't have the full Shem Hashem. The Yevanim were geyser not to have a ksuva. Not to have a ksuva. If Ish v'Isha come together, they have a Yud K. But to be Mashlim, the Hashras, Hashchina, Vav K, no ksuva. No ksuva. Take it away. It's very interesting. Fascinating you find. Fascinating you find. There are a few sugyas in Shas that talk about the halacha of Medrash ksuva. Medrash ksuva. The Gemara at the end of Yevamah said, Beishamai holds that an Isha that says Meis Bailey, even though she's only a Echad, she's a Baldover, she says Meis Bailey, she can get married. Does she get the ksuva? Machlokes Beshami Besil. Beshami says she gets the ksuva. Why does she get the ksuva? We say for ksuva hu nilmat. We dash in the ksuva. The ksuva states that Then you get mad kosav. Medrash ksuba. The Sefer Ksuba who nilmed the lashon of the Mishnah, and the Gemara says Medrash Ksuba. Who hold Medrash Ksuba? Medrash Ksuba. They sham hold Medrash Ksuba. The Gemara in the end of Na'isha the spots in Ksubas says that what happens if an Isha dies first? Does she get a Ksuba? Medrash Ksuba. Sefer Ksuba nilmed. That Medrash Ksuba says no. That's when you get the Ksuba. Since she's dead, it's not getting nasi lacha. You don't get Ksuba. The Gemara in Isha Janaflu, the 8th paragraph of Ksubas. The Gemara talks about whether it is Ksuba nikus mechayim or not. No, it's not nikus mechayim. Yet nikus mechayim. You get a mechayim while they're still married? No, you can't take because like Karini married l'chshti nasi lacha. At times the Gemara talks about we darshan the Ksuba. The whole sugi is darshan the spots of multiple sugis. We darshan the Ksuba to be mashma whether she gets this tonight Ksuba. That's the Ksuba. What's this Medrash Ksuba about? The Medrash Ksuba is the Torah that there is beinish l'ishtai. It's not just a document that makes a certain mischaybis in. This din Torah of how the hasnagos there is between ish and isha. It's the Torah of the marriage. The Torah of the marriage is the ksuba. I always had this hergish. You go to a chasana, one of the kibudim by the chuppah is kriyas ksuba. Okay, the reason why kriyas ksuba is to make a hefsek in between the kedushin and the suin. So kriyas ksuba. The America is the grace to keep it. Yeah, but the America is the grace to keep it. What's the kibbutz? B'zak tashir. Medrash ksuva is the Torah of the marriage. It's the Torah of the marriage. B'zak tashir. The Gedera Shivim, the kibbutz of kriyas ksuva. It's the Torah of the marriage. I'm like to write the Torah into the marriage. The Torah is HaMarriage into the marriage. That's when you mashmum the Shem Hashem, the Yud K and the Vav K to make the Ashtoras HaShechina to the fullest degree, to the nth degree. That's when you make the ksuva. The Yevanim couldn't fatrog this. They couldn't tolerate this. The hadlaka you're doing in the bayis is the hadlaka of the Ashtoras HaShechina, of the Mishpachas Michasis B'Yisrael. Yisrael like Siv, Mishpachas Yisrael like Siv. It's the Makam Ashras Hashchina of the Yud Kei of Ish V'Isha, of the Vav Kei of the Ksuva. In that bias where you have the Ish V'Ishtoi, Madlik, you have that Ashras Hashchina. The Hadlok in Beis HaKnesses is Mechuvin Kineged, the Beis HaMikdash, you'd like the Kaisel Joimi. Dumi did the Beis HaMikdash. The two Hashras Hashchinas where the Yevanim try to be Oikef, try to reinleg in Tumah, that's where we have the Hadlok. It's the Zelda Maisa Hadlok over here and over there. You can make a bracha on it. Because it's one Maisa Mitzvah, you can make a bracha on over here and over there. It's the same thing you can do. The same Maisa, it's the same Maisa. Chazal say that Harogil B'ner Havale Banu Talmidei Chachamim. Harogil B'ner. What is Harogil B'ner? Rashi says it means Hadlokas ner Shabbos and Hadlokas ner Chanukah. Harogel b'nei have the one mit chachamim. It's mashva doesn't need to connect it neither. The Gemara says someone who's rogel b'kiddush hayoyim he's zoichet to have wine. Someone who puts it in the zuzah he's zoichet to have a bayis noy. Someone who's zoy b'tzitzis he has a talis noy. It's need to connect it neither. Harogel b'ner have the one mit chachamim need to connect it neither. What's rogel b'ner? The mitzvah of Hadlokas ner Chanukah is to do where in the bayis. The bias is, what does bias mean? The point is not the physical bias, because suppose you have to have a physical bias. The point is ish ubeisai, the mishpacha, the household. That's how you make kind of mitzvah. That's where you bring the hadlokas in there too. I'm bringing the kedusha to the place of that bias, of that ish v'isha zoicha shchina shrui b'neiim. That's how you make kind of mitzvah in that bias. The amazing halacha you find in their Chanukah. Isha, who's married, daughters, they don't have the din of mahadrim and mahadrim. Why not? Ishta kegufay. The toffel to the bias. Ishta kegufay. You ever find anywhere a mitzvah that's ishta kegufay? Isha doesn't have to lay a Megillah because ishta kegufay. Isha doesn't have to eat mat ishta kegufay. Why, when it comes to mahadrim and mahadrim ishta kegufay? Because the mitzvah is ner ishu beisa. It's a mitzvah that's done in the bias and the ner ishu beisa of that mishpacha. That's where they wanted to eradicate kedusha from. That's where we're mashit kedusha. That's where we bring the narrative. That's where we bring the kedusha to. That's where we have the presuming in that bias. The structure. What? Ikar Nesal Yoda. That's the structure of the mitzvah because that's where they were trying to eradicate the kedusha from in the household. But Neilan, this mitzvah, which is hagdara, which is ner ishu beisa, that's where Chazal made this hagdara of ner ishu beisa. That's where herogel b'ner, someone who does the ner, someone who's makbid on it, someone who's mahadrit with al chumras, with al kavanas, with al hachanas, that havle banon talmidei chachamim. The zoicha that the mida connected mida that bias that ner ishu beisa produces tremendous or kedusha talmidei chachamim. The hergish I had coming in is Baruch Hashem that I think the tzibur that's assembled for this beautiful seder, for this beautiful kollel, is for the most part
all around the world.
And all around the world is what do I see in front? HChanukah are benefiting from the beautiful mishpacha from the bottom that they've built, the Paris and the Paris, and the Haragel Bener Havle Banal Chamid Chachamim Yireim Ushleimim, the beautiful mishpachas that were built, the Reish mishpachas. Many of them are sitting here, and you see the Paris of it. We should all be zeicha that ner, that or should light and go on, and that torch should be passed on door to door until zeicha to see the Eresh Mashiach.
Amen. Yeshakayach Rabbi Sai.